This is Gemara and Taanis Daf Gimel Lo Nishmis Chashil for Zochaim in the version remember it's a Gidul Shanas or Shanamagul Mordechai ben Navashinas the Gilbas Tavashendel as well as Chashur Shem Shal Yisben and Fader Mavigel Mesaj Shem Sibn Reis the Service Ginati to Vasim as Chaysa Yisrael Mendel the rest of Shalei Shem Sami which Avig Halna Shmuel ben Til Yom Khan Rizim Bil Chaim Asvina Dinena Mishin Minnas Bim Figure and Michal Tzim Sel Ur because Shem Zatzim Chlaster Besay Shar Chili Israel we're holding 3 lines on the top on the Gemara and Taanis Daf Gimel again. Let's hope that the chizik that we have should continue. Everyone invite a friend. Taanis a short Masechta, 4 Masechtas in 4 months. Let's get to it. And these are actually loaded Masechtas, not just in Igadata, in fascinating stories, but in Halach Lamaisa, as we'll see already today on Amid Beis, we'll have the fascinating discussion about saying Baruch Atol, Mashvarach, Mardei Geshem, what if you forget, etc. Says the Gemara, 3 lines on the top. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Nasan Aimer says, Rabbi Nasan, Kodesh, Asech, Nesech, Sheichar, LaHashem, on the Kodesh, on the Mizbeach, one should pour a libation to Hashem. The pasuk is referring to 2 libations, one of wine and one of water. Similarly, this is really a continuation of yesterday. We ran out of time. We concluded yesterday with Rav Akiva's opinion that you start saying Mashav Ruach on the 6th day of Sukkot, and he learned it out for the word of Unisacheha, the plural of 2 libations. And the Gemara today has the same question. Maybe you tell me that they're both libations or wine. Why are you assuming one is wine and one is water? Explains the Gemara. If they both were indeed referring to wine, the pasuk should have said either hasich hesech, pour a libation, or nasich nesech, or that's the way to pour. But why this unique and interesting language of a maya hasich nesech? To pour a libation, shmas mina. From there we learn out that it's unique, it's different, it's interesting. And therefore, it tells us, and that's how Rashi in the last wide line explains on the top, from the fact that the Gemara changes its word, shows us that we learned something out, that we learn out that one is of wine and one is of water. And that's really wrapping up the discussion from yesterday, where we learn out the libations and nisach of mayim. Now, says the Gemara, we had many opinions yesterday. We had we'll call them almost the basic opinions of Rav Eliezer versus Rav Yeshua. Rav Eliezer versus Rav Yeshua in the Mishnah. Whether we're mentioning on the first day or the last day, we had Rav Yehuda who mentioned that you do it on the last day, you split up Shachris and Musaf, and then in the middle we had Rav Akiva and Rav Yehuda and Besira telling us on day 2 or day 6. But says the Gemara, Elahaditinan, we have a Mishnah, 8 lines down, Gimel Amar, first word on line is Ditinan. Nizach Hamayim Kol Zayin. We do the water libations. We pour water on the Mizbeach all 7 days. Call Zayin on Sukkot. Mani, who is this opinion? Asked the Gemara. Rav Yeshua, Nemachad Yoima. If you're going to tell me it's Rav Yeshua, who he says you start on the last day on Shmini Atzeres, then Chad Yoima, he only says you say it for 1 day, you should only have the water for libation for 1 day. Rav Akiva, Trei Yoimi, if it's Rav Akiva that says you start on the 6th day, you have the 6th and the 7th, you have 2 days of libations. Rav Yehuda, Ben Besira, Shita Yoimi, Rav Yehuda Ben Besira said you start on the 2nd day, so you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so you have 6 days. So where do we have an opinion that holds you do these water libations, the Nizach HaMayim, the special and the ceremonious activity done on Sukkot? Where do we have an opinion that holds you do it for all 7 days? Explains the Gemara, La'ilam Rav Yehuda ben Beseira. Really, it's Rav Yehuda ben Beseira who says you start on the 2nd day. Usfir like Rav Yehuda, Demas Nisan, and he holds the Rav Yehuda of the following Mishnah. That now we learned in the Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Aimer Belugay Menaset Kol Shemaina. They would pour a lug of water the entire 8 days, kol shmaina, all 8 days. Oma big rishain, umayil rishain. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Besira concurs with Rabbi Yehuda that it really should be for the entirety of 8 days. But he holds it doesn't start on day number 1. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda ben Besira said it starts on day number 2. And therefore, why? And that's what we had yesterday in the bottom of the Amid, the extra mem, yud mem, that rem is that taught us it starts on the 2nd day. And therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, you take take out day number 1 and you include day number 8, and that's our Yehuda ben Beseira got 7 days. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 days, says Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, we do the libations. Again, because he holds like Rav Yehuda that you pour every day. He just doesn't hold you pour on day 1 due to that unique and interesting remez of Mem Yud Mem that you start on the second day. But I asked the Gemara 1 second. Why did he say you don't do it on day number 1? Like we just explained, because we have that remez, we have that illusion of the Mem Yud Mem. Is B'Sheni Yudramizi. It was on the second day. So says the Gemara, Shmini Nami Kiramiza Maya B'Shvi Yudramizi. Says the Gemara again, but so we also should exclude the 8th day, because the final of the words of that remez of the Mem Yud Mem was on the 7th day. So where do you get the review the holes? You're going to say it on the 8th day, and thereby have the Nisach Mayim on day number 8. So we're back to square one. Who is the Tana of the Mishnah that says Nisach Mayim Kol Zayin? Ella, says the Gemara, a new answer. Rav Yeshua, it's really Rav Yeshua. Even though Rav Yeshua in our Mishnah said you started the last day, so seemingly there was only 1 day, says Rav Yeshua, but v'nizach hamayim kol shiva, meaning Rav Yeshua holds, when do you mention rain? When do you say mashiva ruach? That was on the last day of Yontif. What about pouring the actual libations, the nizach hamayim? That is kol shiva, that is all 7 days of Sukkot. And the Gemara proves such a din. Nischamayim kol shiva hilchasa gemirila, says the Gemara of Yeshua, and the fact that you do the libations all 7 days, that's halach l'Moshe Sinai. How do I know that? Esther Natiya is a special halach that if I have 10 saplings, I could work the entire field until Rosh Hashanah, even though it's Erev Shemitah. Arava, the special halach of Arava, whether that means circling the Aroin, the Mizbech, whether that means taking the Arava on the last day, but so the Gemara concludes, who is the author of the Mishnah that says that you do need chamayim 7 days? It's Rav Yeshua. Rav Yeshua says you only do mashva ruach on the last day. Says Gemara, you're right. That's mentioning mazkir mashva ruach. But with regard to the actual nizach hamayim, that we have a special lach Sinai, as we're taught in this brayso that says you do it all 7 days. Says the Gemara of Yehuda Omer Mishum Rav Yeshua Omer Lefnei Atevi Yom Tov Achar Shal Chag Achrei Mazkir Rishon and Mazkir Piyot Rishon Shal Pesach Rishon Mazkir. This is a quotation of the final opinion in the brayso from yesterday of Beis and Beis, that we had this opinion of Rav Yehuda Mishum Rav Yeshua, and we made mention to some in the live share. We mentioned it's interesting. There's Rav Yehuda and there's Rav Yeshua, and now we have Rav Yehuda Mishum Rav Yeshua, and he's seemingly saying something very similar to Rav Yehuda in our Mishnah. That on the last day of Sukkot, the one who davens Musaf starts, Shachris not, and on the first day of Pesach, one who davens Shachris, yes, and Musaf, no. Says the Gemara, hey, Rabbi Yeshua. Again, this was Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. So says the Gemara, which Rabbi Yeshua? Ilim Rabbi Yeshua Demas Nisan. If it's Rabbi Yeshua of our Mishnah, like we just finished saying a moment ago, Rabbi Yeshua says on the last day of Yontif. He doesn't say split up between Shachris and Musaf. It sounds like the whole last day. Even on Shachris, Rashi explains. El Rav Yeshua de Braisa. It must be Rav Yeshua of the following Braisa that says, which we had this Braisa yesterday in the bottom of Beis and Beis. Ha'amar mishas and chasai. That Rav Yeshua said for the time that we put down the lulav. It says the Gemara that doesn't work either. Why? Because the time you put that down the lulav doesn't fit either. Again, let's say it a little bit better. Says the Gemara, if the Yeshua of the Braisa, it doesn't work, because Ha'amar Mishas and Chasai. Rav Yeshua said that when do we start asking for rain? When you put down the lulav, which we learned yesterday, and this is Rashi's pshat. That means he starts on day number 8. You put down the lulav on day number 7, and you start on day number 8. So he doesn't say split up Shachris and Musaf. So again, which of Yeshua is Rav Yehuda saying the name of Rav Yeshua that on the last day of Sukkot you split up Shachris and Musaf? Question number 1. Visu, and furthermore says the Gemara, Haditani Rav Yehuda Mishum ben Beseira. Rav Yehuda said the name of Ben Beseira. That's our Mishnah. Hey Ben Beseira, who's this Rav Yehuda Ben Beseira? If you're going to tell me Yehuda Ben Beseira, if you're going to tell me that this is Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, he said, Amr b'sheni b'chagu maskir. He said yesterday on Beis and Beis on the second day of Yontif. So says the Gemara, we have a problem, a twofold question. At the end of yesterday's brisa, we had Rav Yehuda Oimer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua. He said in the last day of Sukkot we split up Shachris and Musaf. Shachris doesn't say Mashruach, Musaf does say Mashruach. Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda Oimer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua. Which Rabbi Yeshua is this? We had Rabbi Yeshua in our Mishnah that says you start on the final day. Can't be, because he seemingly says both Shachris and Musaf. We had Rabbi Yeshua of the brisa that says Mishas and Chasa, you put down the lulav again. Sounds like you start on the whole 8th day. So question number one is which Rabbi Yeshua? Question number two is, we have that it says in a brisa that Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Ben Beseira, which also is a problem. Saying a similar din, because we don't have such a Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The only Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira we have says on din number 2, nothing to do with din number 8. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Tehei, you know what it means? Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira. We mixed up all the brisas. It's Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira. Again, it's not Rabbi Yehuda Imer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua. It's not Rabbi Yehuda Imer Mishum ben Beseira. Rather, it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira. And explains the Gemara, where did the confusion come from? Zimin the Kamerle B'Shmei. Sometimes we called him in his own name, which is Rabbi Yeshua, v'zimnin negarle b'shmei da'aba, and sometimes we called him in his father's name, Ben Beseira. Where do we get these two opinions? Says the Gemara, one is before he had smicha, one is after he had smicha. After he had smicha, he got his own name of Rabbi Yeshua, but beforehand, he did not. So again, really, this is all Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which works well with our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, who is the one that says in the last day we split up Shachris and Musaf. We had two different braysos. One says Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, one says Mishum Ben Beseira. It's really one person in the same. Says the Gemara, Tana, we're about 10 lines to the bottom of Gimel Amud Aleph. First word on line is Labasar. Now we have a nice Agadata. Tana betal ubaruchais l'chayvu chacham lahaskir. You do not have to mention tal, the dew, ruchais, and the wind. Vimba lahaskir maskir. If you want, you could. My taima. Amar Rav Chanina v'shein netzarin. Because winds and dew are never withheld. They come every day. So you don't have to daven for them. If you want to, no problem. Says Gemara, how do you know that? How do you know the dew is not withheld? Eliyahu Hanavi says to Achav, Chai Hashem, which is the Lashon, it's a word swearing. Elokei Yisrael, the God of Yisrael, Sharmati Lefanov, that I'm standing in front of him. I make a shvua, there will be no rain nor dew. Kiyim lefi devari, only according to my word. Says Eliyahu, which by the way, this was one of the rayas from yesterday that Taisus brought, that Eliyahu Hanavi was holding the key of rain. We see he controlled it. Uksev, and the pasuk continues. Lei chera alachav, go show achav etanel, matar al bnei adama. It says etanel matar, just says rain. Vilutal like amerle, doesn't say a word about the dew. So Eliyahu Hanavi is saying it's not going to rain and it's not going to be dew. And then it says, so go to Achav and tell him there's going to be rain. Wait, what happened to the dew? My taima. What's the reason? As we turn over to Gimel Amud B, says the Gemara, Deloi me atzar. The reason is that dew is never withheld, even though rain could be withheld. Dew is never withheld, and that's raya number 1, that dew is never withheld, and therefore what's the take-home points? You don't have to mention dew. If you do, it's okay. Says the Gemara, one second, why did Eliyahu swear? It sounds like Eliyahu said to Achav, it's not going to rain, it's not going to dew. Why would he say that? Explains the Gemara, this is what Eliyahu Hanavi meant. Afilu tal debracha nami loi asi. Even the tell of goodness is not going to come. Says the Gemara, okay, great. So why in the next pasuk when it says, and then it started raining, why doesn't it say it started raining and it started being tal du of bracha? Answers the Gemara, Mishum Minkra Milsa, that's not recognizable. The people cannot differentiate between the good dew and the not good dew, and therefore there was no need to mention that in the pasuk. But indeed, we have a raya that dew is never withheld. Raya number 1. What's number 2? Is ruchais, winds minalu dula ma'atzir, 4 lines down. How do we know that winds are never withheld? Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi Damar Akra. Ki, like the 4 directions of the heavens, Parashti Eschem Nom Hashem, I spread you out, says Hashem. Mike Amarlu, what is Hashem saying to Klal Yisrael? Ilem Achi Karmelu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. If Hashem is telling Klal Yisrael, Tibartinchu ba'arba ruchi dalma, Hashem is saying, I've scattered you to the 4 directions. Iachi ki arba, be arba mi ba'ilei. If what the pasuk means, is that Hashem is saying, I have spread you out to the four directions. Doesn't mean like the four directions. I spread you out to the four directions. So what's the keh? What's the like? Elohi kamar, this is what the pasuk means. Kishem she'ef shalaylam b'lei ruchais, kachef shalaylam b'lei Yisrael. Just like it's impossible for the world to exist without the winds, so too it's impossible for the world to exist without Klal Yisrael, and that's key, like the four directions. Just like there will always be winds, so too there will always be Klal Yisrael. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chanina, Hilkach, based on what we just said, that there will always be dew, there will always be winds. Hilkach b'moisachama nisamar, Amar Mashva Ruach, in Machzir Noisai. If you said it's going to blow winds, no big deal, because there will always be winds. But Amar Mayra Geshem, Machzir Noisai. You say Mashva Ruach Mayra Geshem, you have to go back. Why? We learned yesterday, because it's a klala, it's a curse for it to rain in the summer. So he said, Mashvarach, Mardageshem, the summer you must return. B'moisak Shamim in the winter. Again, if you didn't say Mashvarach, no big deal. There's winds every single day. But if you didn't say Mardageshem, then you must go back. And not only that, even if you said that Hashem is going to remove the wind and He's going to take away the dew, which is not good, still in Machzir Noisai, you do not have to go back for the simple reason that it's going to happen anyways. It doesn't make a difference. It's just an inconsequential tefillah. To take one moment, this Taisis over here, Taisis B'Meisachama, goes through with the Allah Lamaisa. What happens if you forget? Let's just point out two very important details in Taisis. We don't have time for the whole thing right now, but Taisis in the first narrow line says, Im Safik im Iskirim Lav. You don't remember if you said Mashva Ruach Shlayamar Sham Davar Mesek Shamim Kol Lamid Yoim Chazaka Mashu Lamad Hu Oimer. For 30 days you have a chazaka, whatever you normally say. For 30 days after Pesach, if you're not sure, we assume you said Mashva Ruach and Umachzirin Misafik Kol Lamid Yoim, and you must repeat Shemaina Esrei. To point out one more very interesting detail in Taisis. Taisis quote Amari B'Shema Adoni Avi Ezri. He says you should say Morid Atol in the summer. You know why? So we learned the Gemara today because it doesn't hurt. But says this is a fascinating idea. Till then you'll never come to a suffix. Amar suffix lo Amar. Because you'll never have a suffix, because you'll always have send Morid Atol. And we know that B'diavad, for those who have inspired, for example, if during the winter you forgot to say Mashruach Merdageshem, but you said Morid Atol, B'diavad you're Yaitzik. At some level you mentioned it, and therefore says Taisvis that's a reason unto itself that you should say Marid Atol. Now let's go back into the Gemara and let's continue. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learned in the Mishnah, you don't have to mention the clouds and the winds. If you want to mention them, you are allowed to. My time because they are never withheld. Says the Gemara, is that true? That the pasuk says I'm going to withhold the heavens from the clouds and from the winds. You think it means from the clouds and from the winds. Maybe it means that Hashem's going to withhold the rain. It says it won't be rain. What do we do with the pasuk that says the Gemara? So that's what we learn, that Hashem will withhold the clouds and the winds. But now everyone's bothered by the same kasha. Kasha ruchas, kasha avim avim. What's going on? We have a stira. We just finished saying a moment ago, tal and ruach, dew and wind are never withheld. Now we have a brayse that says that they are withheld. And secondly, we had that the first brayse that taught us that the clouds are never withheld, and the second brayse is telling us that the clouds are yes withheld. Explains the Gemara, ha'avim like kasha, ha'bacharfi, ha'ba'afli. And now we have the wisdom of science, the wisdom of different temperatures, etc., the weather in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, one is the early clouds before the rain, those will never be withheld. Haba'afli, the later clouds, those could be withheld. Ruchsa ruchais like Asha, explains the Gemara, why not? Habaruch metzuya, habaruch she'enai mitzua. A regular wind will never stop, but a ruch she'enai mitzua, an abnormal wind, could be withheld. And explains the Gemara, ruch she'enai mitzua, chazil lebeidara. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Ruch she'enai mitzuya, chazil lebeidara. We need that to winnow. You throw up the grain, and the chaff flies one way, and the grain flies the other way. So we need a ruach sheinu mitzuya. So how can you tell me that it's not so necessary? Answers the Gemara, no big deal. Efshar ben aflasa, you could always remove the chaff from the grain with a sieve or sifter, and therefore it's not completely integral. Tano, and we continue discussing the wind, the clouds. Ha'avim va'arucha shniyos lamatar. They're secondary. They're almost as good as the rain. Hechidami. Amar ula v'temin Rav Yehuda debasar mitra. Explains Ula name Rav Yehuda the Basar Mitra. We're talking about when it comes after the rain. That which comes after the rain is almost as good as the rain. Lememra says Gemara Demal Yusahi. That sounds like clouds and winds after the rain is good. Vakseva the Torah says Yitan Hashem es matar artzcha avak va'afar. But the Torah says Hashem's going to make it rain when it's going to be dusty and when it's going to be dirty. And va'omar Ula v'yitim Rav Yehuda zika the Basar Mitra. This is talking about the wind after the rain, and that's a bad thing, because what's going to happen? The wind after the rain is going to pull up all the dirt, and it's going to stick to the crops, which are now wet. So we see clearly it's not a good thing. Explains the Gemara like Dasi Nicha Dasi Razya. Two types of winds after the rain. One is when it's gentle, rain that falls gently. One is rain that falls forcefully. Or one is a wind that brings up the dust. One is a wind that doesn't bring up dust. Either we can differentiate in the wind, or we can differentiate in the rain. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda, 7 lines to the bottom, continuing the discussion of winds and clouds. Zikar the basar mitra kemitra, that the wind after a rain is like the rain itself, it's beneficial. Eva the basar mitra, clouds after rain, kemitra is also like the rain. And shemsha the basar mitra, sun after rain, kitrei mitri is like 2 rains, it's double as good. Lemute mai says the Gemara, you're listing everything, the wind, the cloud, the sun. What's not good? Lemute, this comes to exclude gili, dalalia. This comes to observe flashes of light at night, which some Shatim learn that means lightning, others learn that just means other flashes at night. V'shimsha debeni karchi, and when there's sunlight that appear between the clouds. Amar Rava, says Rava, on the same idea, mali tilga leturi kichamisha mati la'ara. Snow on the mountains is 5 times rain. It's like raining 5 times on the ground. Shnamar, how do we see that? Ki kisheleg, like snow. Ya'amar hu eretz v'geshem matar geshem mitrois uzai. So for the plural, matar and the 4 other mentions of rain shows us that there are 5 times rain for shelling. The shelling on the mountain is like 5 times rain. V'amar Rava, and Rava continues, Telga laturi mitra. Razya lilane. Telga laturi, snow for the mountains. Mitra razya lilane. Heavy rain is beneficial for the trees. Mitra nicha leperi. Gentle rain is good for the fruit. And we will actually let's just learn one more line as we turn over to Dalam and Aleph. Or pila afilu lepartzida tetuti kala mahanyalei. When you have arpila, light rain is good even for a seed under the ground. My arpila ure pile, that which awakens and comes up through the cracks. We'll pick up from here. More discussions tomorrow about the rain.